Welcome to Behind the Prop Podcast, where each week we will bring you stories, lessons, and some tips from behind the prop. Please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Pre-show checklist. Microphones.
Check.
Sound check.
Complete.
Recording all channels.
Checked and verified. Pre-show checklist complete.
Tower. Bravo Tango Papa is holding short, ready for departure.
Bravo Tango Papa, you are clear for takeoff. Have a great show.
You're clear for takeoff and Wilco. Bravo Tango Papa.
What's up, Wally?
Hey, Bobby, how are you?
I'm good. This is episode 8. We have another guest today, but before we get to that, last week we had an episode where we talked about the ignition system and the magneto. You teased a little bit about a student pilot with their CFI who had a problem. Why don't you share the end of that story and help the listeners understand what that problem might have been?
I will. So, in a nutshell, I'll just give a wrap up of what the question was. We had a student pilot who was she was doing her check ride prep, her 3 hours of check ride prep before her private pilot check ride, and she took off in a 172N model, November model, with a carburetor, and as she was rolling down the runway, it just didn't seem right. And she mentioned to her CFI that it didn't feel right. The power of the airplane just didn't seem right. And there were some other reasons. They had an extra person in the back of the airplane, and he attributed it to an extra 110 pounds of weight in the airplane. And they went ahead and took off, and as they were climbing out, everything seemed okay to the CFI, but to the young lady flying, she still said it just didn't seem right, and they went ahead and flew up to altitude and started doing some maneuvers. And after her persistently saying there's something not right with this airplane, the CFI looked over and realized that the ignition switch was on one magneto, and they reached down and they moved the switch to both, and they got a little bit of a power boost. And then she said, yeah, this feels right. So the point is that during your magneto check, which again I think should be called an ignition system check rather than a mag check, the point is, if you look at the checklists in most airplanes, it talks about looking for a drop in RPM. The one thing the checklists don't really say is it's implied, but it doesn't really say to look for a rise in RPM when you go back to both. So what she did is she was in both. She flipped the switch over to one side, got a little drop, went back to both, got a rise, then flipped the switch over 2 clicks, got a drop, and then when she went to go back to both, instead of going 2 clicks over, she went 1 click over, and may or may not have seen a little rise, but they took off on one magneto, so basically 4 spark plugs and probably about 8% loss of power, and that's what the whole situation was. So what I try to encourage people is not only to look for a drop in RPM, but also look for a rise in RPM when you go back to both.
Awesome. Well, don't take off with one magneto. There's 2 for a reason, and it'll
That's
be very
right.
beneficial to be using both of those. So now let's get into today. We have a guest with us. We have Devin Miller on the show. He's a close friend of mine and has been a customer, student, and maybe one day will be an instructor for United Flight Systems in the future. And also the host and the be-all of everything, I guess, at Family Pilot. Devin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Yeah, so I met Devin, it's probably been 3 years now, almost 2.5 probably. Just had acquired a flight school, me and a partner of mine. We were in the building. It was a weekend. I think it was a Sunday. A great instructor who's still an instructor and is actually an assistant chief was working that day, was in the back rooms with me. We were watching the day go by. There was not much activity. We had lost most of our instructors due to them going to the regionals. Gio was the only one working that day. And Gio came to me and said, hey, there's nothing else on my schedule. What should I do? I said, man, if you could just stay for a little longer, you never know who might walk through that door. I had no idea how to run a flight school. I was just guessing at the time, but didn't want to lose any chance to have a customer fly. And lo and behold, Devin Miller walked in and said, the other flight schools said they couldn't fly me. Anybody take me on a discovery flight today. Hence you met Geo, and hence you've now flown 300 plus hours, most if not all at this flight school for the most part, and bought a couple of planes, 3 planes to be exact, started a online presence and a little ate up with aviation maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible story thinking back on it, and just how when you really set your mind to something and you have a goal, things can get pretty can fall in line for you, and we're really fortunate to have had the experiences that we have. And what we mostly love about it is what it enables us to do as a family. I mean, a weekend trip to Atlanta just because my daughter wanted to go see panda bears. I mean, nobody's making that drive cross country, but what aviation does for us is just, we love it. No looking back now.
And you say us, your wife's her name's Mel, and you have 2 kids. They love to fly with you as well, right?
They do. My wife loves what aviation does for us. She may not really like those IMC moments in our plane, but she loves going places. And the family just the same. The kids love to be up in the air, see other planes. It still rings at my heartstrings. But my little guy's obsessed with helicopters. One day I'll get him on that fixed wing train again. But for right now, they're just loving it. And the vacations and the trips and the destinations that we can do really take advantage of living down here in Texas.
So we'll probably wrap some with it too, but tell us a little bit about your venture into this Family Pilot on Facebook, Instagram, I think everywhere.
Yeah.
At Family Pilot is your online presence. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing with Family Pilot.
Yeah, so it started off by just me wanting to, so living in Texas, my family's all back home in Canada, and really wanting to just show people like, hey, like this is what I'm doing. Like we can all remember our discovery flights probably, and some of that early passion that most of us still carry, but wanted to just show people what it was like, and when you're flying, you're not up there taking pictures, and so I started just recording flights through a GoPro or 2 in a plane, and started recording some of the flights, and never edited video in my life, never thought I would. But then just started sharing them with my family, my parents, my cousin's a pilot. I was excited for him to see some of this stuff, and that's how it kind of just started off. And I was using these videos to really just replay my own flights. I mean, you go through some of your lessons and you replay them, look for what you did right, look what you did wrong. That's really what I was doing. And then I went and did a trip over to the Grand Canyon and brought my cameras, rented a plane, and we went and did a little discovery flight over there with a flight school. And it was gorgeous, and threw those videos up online, and people started actually watching them. I mean, usually it's like my mom, my dad, my cousin, 3 views or something, and then I'd watch it a dozen times. But this Grand Canyon trip, a lot of people watched it. So we just started recording some of our trips and documenting our family vacations and experiences, or something that we could all kind of look back onto, and then it just kind of grew a little bit of a following, and then we started getting better at video editing and started putting these videos together more and more, and now just really enjoy showing what general aviation is to the public, whether they like aviation or not. I think we can all benefit by growing general aviation, and we can grow general aviation by giving an awareness for what it can achieve for you, or what it will enable for you, beyond just pushing people into professional pilot careers. General aviation itself is really quite rewarding.
No doubt. So one of those Family Pilot videos pretty much made your sites probably a little bit more famous, right? I think it was
did.
Now going on 18 months ago. I don't know, you probably know the date better than I do. It was you and your family were taking a trip. I think it was that Atlanta trip that you talked about. I guess I won't ruin it, but I know you've talked about this on many other shows and videos, but tell us a little bit about what happened on that day.
Yeah, so we took a trip over to Atlanta and spent the weekend over there, and we were having a good time. And the day we were going to leave, the weather wasn't great leaving Atlanta, so we said, well, let's go back. We went into an aquarium down there and just killed off a few hours for the morning clouds and storms to move out. And I really thought that was going to be the more intense or stressful part of the trip. So we had a great day. We leave Atlanta. We work, center was great. They work us through some storms and some buildups and stuff, but we had good margins. Everything was good. We get out and we're coming into, we're going to stop at my kid's favorite FBO. It's Meridian Key Field, and they have free ice cream there. So obviously the kids are pretty excited about it. And it was a while ago. We got cleared for the approach and went to start to slow down because we were number 2. I remember we're going to start thinking about some spacing, and Meridian was going to sneak in front of us because he was going a lot faster. And I remember pulling back on that throttle and just nothing changing. And, when you're learning to fly, a lot of it's by sound first and foremost, and it's kind of that instinct. And just didn't hear that sound drop, so you kept pulling back on the throttle, and and this is in a Piper Arrow, and then there's a little bit of play in there sometimes when you're throttling back. You don't get that until you get a little bit further back, so kept pulling it back, and then all of a sudden the gear horn goes off, and then it just kind of clicks that, hey, my throttle's all the way out, and we're not slowing down. My manifold pressure's pinned, and my RPMs are pinned, and we're gonna have to figure this out, But you're right, that video did go crazy online and kind of sparked up Family Pilot as you know it today. The ironic thing is we weren't even planning on recording that flight. I didn't have the audio recordings going on. We had a camera that was just stuck there from the trip over, which we planned on filming. And we turned it on for the departure and everything, and it was recording. But we didn't have the audio rigged up or anything at all, but it ended up being one of the really influential moments of my life when it changes your perspective on general aviation and all those practice maneuvers that you do in the pattern and over, and that muscle memory and that training. I mean, we need to take that seriously.
Yeah. So I know what happens when a throttle cable breaks like that. I didn't think I learned until that day, but what happens when a throttle cable breaks?
Yeah, well, so it's a great design. When that throttle cable breaks, the linkages are all spring loaded, and if you're running a snowblower or a lawnmower and your throttle cable breaks, your engine shuts off. Obviously, you could imagine why that would be problematic in an airplane. So when the throttle cable breaks in a plane, our throttles will spring forward. And then what you can do is you can use your mixture to then kind of give you some throttle control by essentially turning off your engine and doing a power off landing. So
you guys, I've watched the video a few times. You guys fly around for a while. ATC was great. You actually called who is our mechanic still today. Mm-hmm. Talked to him on the phone through ATC. Yeah. Y'all troubleshot the best you could, and the decision was made to shut down the engine on short final, I believe, and make a landing safely. Obviously, you're here and your family's here, and I remember your wife's expression when you roll off the runway. That had to be a pretty hairy experience, but if you're gonna have an emergency, that's probably a fairly decent one to have, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's looking back on it, as you get more experience as a pilot, you always think, wow, I really didn't know anything before. I mean, I've since done some commercial check rides, and I didn't fail them. I did 2 commercial check rides, just to be clear, single engine and then multi-engine. But as it's so important just to keep learning. I mean, looking back, I was trained and proficient and felt comfortable in that situation. When I pulled the throttle back and there was nothing changing, I was pretty sure that we were going to have a power off landing, and that was going to be what was going to be the solution. But take your time. I just remember thinking, all right, let's figure this out. Let's figure out how we're going to get down. Let's figure out margin and what ifs, and that's what we did. ATC was great. We used all that we could. We even called our mechanic, like you say, and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And had a good chat. And he's like, yeah, that's going to be about all that you're going to be able to do. And not a big deal. We'll get you fixed when you're on the ground. So that's what we set up for it. Spent a lot of time thinking, all right, we've all practiced power offs before, and we know what that looks like and what sight picture we're going to shoot for. But we've never really practiced, restarting your engine, or it's not your instructor choosing when to kill your engine. You're going to choose when to kill your engine. So just think that through. Where do you want to be, and when do you want to do it? How do you want to be set up? What about your gear? Do you want to get that down before? Landing assured is something to think through. But in this situation, I was high, I was fast, so landing assured wasn't really my issue, and I had a massive runway. So just brief that to yourself a couple times and make sure that you've really thought it through and know your restart procedure. And are you going to leave your mags on? Are you going to leave your turn them off? What are you going to do with your fuel? And just make sure you know what you're going to do and that it's thought out, and then do it like you've been trained.
Yeah, that was a very interesting day for sure. I'll never forget when I watched that video. One of the things that stands out is when Ray, our mechanic, actually says, "Wait, the throttle cable broke and he's in the air right now." Like, he's very surprised that all this is happening real time. I'm sure he hasn't gotten very many phone calls from ATC to try and troubleshoot something like that in the air. So part of what we wanted to talk about today was not only the Ad Family pilot, but really just how do general aviation pilots stay proficient? What are some of the tips and tricks that a flight school owner, a DP, and a very active GA pilot would recommend for people? So I guess I'll start with you, Wally. When you got to see hundreds of people flying GA on a regular basis, what are some of the things you pass along as guidance or tips that you might tell someone that they should be doing as a pilot to stay proficient?
Well, one thing that comes to mind with this, Devin, is one thing I stress with my applicants is checklist usage. The fact is that, if I'm not mistaken, there is no checklist for this situation.
Correct.
So especially with my more advanced check rides, commercial check rides, I'll give them situations of an abnormal or an emergency that there is no checklist for. And so to say there's a right answer to how you'd handle the situation, there's lots of right answers. But just going through the thought process of how we're going to manage this situation. And one thing that you did mention is taking your time with it. Unless you're on fire or unless you're fuel critical, most times do have time. So, it sounded like you did a really good job of managing your resources and using your resources. One thing I talk about on instrument check rides primarily is when there's a change of plan. In other words, ATC gives you a reroute or ATC gives you a hold or something like that. This is something that you probably were not planning for. I tell the applicants, I said, there's three things that you should be thinking about when this happens. And the first thing is fuel. How's my fuel situation? Because fuel equates to time. Basically, how much time do I have? The second thing you should be looking at or considering is fuel. How much time do I have? How much fuel do I have? And the third thing you should be thinking about is fuel. How much fuel do I have? How much time do I have? Fuel, and fuel. Because it does equate to time. And it sounds like you were in a fairly good situation where you did have time and were able to kind of make that phone call to a mechanic, which, that's exactly what we would do with the airlines, is we would get on the phone with our dispatcher and our maintenance people and try to troubleshoot for the best outcome. But sounds like you did an excellent job. And again, there are things that are going to happen to these airplanes that we don't have checklists for. So you are kind of improvising.
Yeah, one thought that jumps to mind for me as I think about proficiency, being a flight school owner, is really what are people doing to stay proficient? There's a lot of things out there, and one of our shows we have on our list is to talk about the FAA Wings program, which is really their proficiency and safety program, which is a great tool. Everyone go look into it, listen to our show when we do it. But it does come back to just what is the minimums that the FAA tells us that we have to do. And if you're just doing those minimums, which I know many of us, and I'm guilty of doing it myself, of getting my 6 approaches and holds and things done days, if not hours, before my 6 months runs out, that's probably not that I'm proficient. It probably just means I'm legal. What if someone's getting their night stuff done every 89 days? Would you like to fly with that person if you weren't able to help them, Wally?
No, I don't think so. And I ask on check rides who defines proficiency, and it's the person in the mirror. who defines proficiency, and it might be different for all of us. I know I've been in situations in my airline career where I worked in the simulator building, and I only flew a couple times a month, 2 days a month usually. And once I was in the rhythm of just flying 2 days a month, I felt very comfortable. But now, if I flew 2 days a month, I would feel like a fish out of water. I wouldn't feel right, and I need to fly a lot more than that.
Yeah, I think we talk about it a lot early on in your private pilot, maybe your early instrument days, about just personal minimums. And I'm a big advocate of personal minimums. I know what mine are. I know when I will go in the soup or not in the soup. I know what my layers have to be from the above ground before I'm going to shoot an approach, those sorts of things still today. But I don't hear people talking about them regularly well into their career, meaning they don't reflect on them like they do when they're early on. And I think that's part of it. Like, even how often will I fly night by myself to stay proficient without having someone ride with me? And so I'll do about every 50 days, I want to stay at night current for myself. And it might be easy for me because I own a flight school, but it's not too hard to go fly with someone at night. If you love aviation, you'll be able to find somebody to ride with, I'm sure. But I try to every 4 or 5 months have someone fly with me. I ask a CFI who wants to log some nighttime. And again, that might sound simpler for me, but it's not. You can ask anyone, I'm sure, that is more rated than you are, has more time than you are, to go ride with you at night and just see if they see anything you're doing right, wrong, or indifferent, right? That would maybe make you a better nighttime pilot. So that's kind of my night stuff. The thank goodness I fly enough that my daytime and passenger stuff won't run out on me, more than likely. But Devin, as you think about proficiency, and we talked about it in a recent instrument flight, what do you think about for yourself as it relates to staying current and then staying proficient as a family pilot? You got some pretty important cargo with you when you're taking those trips.
Yeah, and just to build on what you were saying, Bobby, you learn something on every flight. When you fly with somebody new, you either learn a different way to do something that you want to adopt, or you learn that your way is a great way and that you should keep doing that. So you do learn from any pilot out there, whether it confirms something that you do or you learn a new technique or a new way to think about it. So always just be open, and I think that's what's really unique about aviation, is that the community is very open to learn and very safety oriented. When I think about proficiency, I'm in a different situation, and I think my situation is probably a lot of the GA situation. And what I mean is, Bobby, you're at a flight school every day. You hear an airplane start every day. You're watching people go from discovery flights to private to instrument, and you're hearing the chatter and the experiences. You're hearing people talk about flying and general aviation every day. Wally, you're a similar boat, right? I mean, professionally, as a airline pilot, and then as a DPE. But on behalf of the guy that meets with a DPE, gets his ticket, and then goes home and takes a big sigh and says, "Oh, good, that passed my check ride." And not necessarily just because of COVID, but especially because of COVID. And people might not be as practiced as they had been. I mean, if you were flying once a month to go to dinner or lunch or whatnot, maybe you haven't done that in a while. Our patterns, our behaviors are changing. But one thing that scares me about general aviation is the accident rates, because I do study that. And it's not to be morbid, but it's to learn and to understand and grow. But look around holidays in the U.S. and around the world. Accident rates around holidays pop up, and it's a theory that I have. And whether it's right or wrong, I don't really care, because it's something that will sit with me. But I don't want to be a pilot who is not flying regularly and then jumps in for the holiday vacation. And I don't hear about aviation every day. When my Monday to Friday career is talking about other things. I've found just listening to podcasts and ironic that we're talking on one now, but you can listen to the industry in the aviation, listen to ATC. I mean, watch YouTube a selfless plug there, but I mean, watching other people fly just keeps it fresh in your mind, and it tries to keep that in there. And we took a break with COVID. Texas was pretty shut in here for a little while, and my family actually went to Canada for a while as well. And I hadn't flown, and when I started flying, it was not proficient. It probably wasn't even safe. I had a CFI with me, and I wouldn't have wanted to have been single pilot. But those breaks, for the folks that don't live aviation every day, we all have the passion for it, but when you're not around it, what worries me is that my proficiency is going to eat away.
Well, that's a good point, because I do get blinded, and I try and get all these people around the flight school to remember what it was like to be that 1 or 2 hour pilot, because that's the excitement that we see or should be seeing come through our door on a regular basis. But it does get tough when you don't have a plan. When we're working on a rating or a commercial license or a private pilot's license, you have a plan and you're working towards something. And then when you finish that, you have this release of anxiety probably. And then you take a deep breath, but you might not have a purpose to go fly, which then causes you some gaps in your proficiency.
Exactly.
Right? I don't know a single person, and if you're out there, send me an email. I'd love to hear it. Who goes out and flies, turns around a point on a regular basis after they get 200 hours of flight time. It just doesn't happen. But the skill is still as important as it was when you were learning how to fly. I have not alone gone to the practice area and done a power off stall since I passed my commercial check ride. Mm-hmm. Does that make me a less pilot? I don't know, but does it make me recognize it when I'm taking off as well? Probably not, right? So I could probably use some of that practice on an ongoing basis, no matter what stage I'm at in aviation.
Well, a build on that is, absolutely. And I remember, when I got my instrument rating, you asked me, when are you starting your commercial? And it kind of, it didn't really resonate with me, because I was like, well, I'm not going to the airlines. That's not my plan. So I just never thought of it. But the commercial check ride, which I've now done, so spoiler alert, but I mean, it really changes. It brings you to another level, and the CFI will bring me to another level, and then as you just continue to develop, have that plan, and honestly, I have no intentions of being an actual commercial pilot, but I went and got the ratings, and I feel more proficient and a better pilot than ever before. And it's just a great training. And when you're doing these maneuvers, and DPEs will always reinforce this, but understand why you're doing this maneuver and truly understand it. Because if you do have an engine failure, single engine failure, or a full on engine out in a single engine plane, those maneuvers aren't just go until you hear the beep and then push forward. Those maneuvers are what you're gonna need to do effectively to land the plane and frankly save your own life.
No doubt.
Devin, let me ask you this: when you had this incident with the Arrow, were you a commercial pilot at that point?
I was not.
Okay. I bring that up because probably the mother of all maneuvers on the commercial pilot check ride is the power off 180. You mentioned that, and you see the applicant usually cringe. And basically, that's what you did on the situation with the Arrow. You had to shut the engine off using the mixture, so you did a power off landing. So I mean, there's an example right there of, we think of this as, well, this is a maneuver that the ACS says we got to do because we got to check the box, but this is real world. So that power off 180 is a great maneuver, and I try to. If I have someone who has no intent of getting a commercial, we do that maneuver, or I try to do it with them. If I'm instructing, I did it with my daughters, and it's a great maneuver, even if you're not pursuing a commercial. But with all this in mind, I want to plug a book. It's called The Killing Zone. And that's a horrible name, but that's the name of the book, and I didn't name it. It's written by Paul Craig, and it's a very analytical book, and it's actually, some of it's pretty dry statistics, almost like a textbook, but if you can get through all that, it's very interesting. And he just has some statistics, and what he shows in the statistics is that the hour range of pilots where most accidents happen is 101 to 150 hours, and what happens at 101 to 150 hours. And I think what happens is a private pilot, they probably get their private pilot certificate around 60, 70 hours. They go out, and 30 hours later, they're feeling pretty good about themselves. I don't want to say cocky, but maybe they get a little complacent. And then maybe after 150 hours, then maybe you are really gaining some proficiency. It's a very interesting read. Again, it's called The Killing Zone. You can get it online or get a paper version, but very interesting read.
That's interesting, because I think I remember some of my moments where I was most influenced by external factors was probably between 100 and 150, right? You had some friends who wanted to go to dinner. The layer, the bottom of the clouds was 1,800 feet. You wanted to get them there. You wanted to show off that you were a private pilot. I had this real strong force that day, and I said no twice, but I didn't say no and we're done. I said no, let's give it another hour. And I was so uncommitted to saying no and just calling it a day back then. But as I broke through maybe 150 or so, and I think about going to pick up my daughter in Austin, and it's 2,200 feet here, and I look at Austin and it says 800 feet there. I'm just not going to go. I'm not going to take that chance. I'm rated. I could go. Legally I could go, but I don't feel comfortable to try and go tackle that when I don't have to go, and I have the option to drive a car. Yes, it's going to take me a few more hours, but I think we hear it a lot, but I hear it a lot around here. It's better to be down here wishing I was up there than up there wishing I was down here.
Absolutely.
So there's no, I tell everybody, you don't have to go. You just don't have to go. And I've never seen a moment where you had to go if you were worried about that little bit of risk. And the last point I'll make before I ask Devin one more question is talking about that power off 180. That's something that I think we work on pulling the power for a private pilot student to do the emergency procedures and go through it. And they probably sometimes land and sometimes go around. But I've always, when I do that night proficiency stuff, my third landing is always a power off 180. And it's a personal Bobby challenge to say, if I can't do it tonight, then I'm probably not going to be able to do it during the day. So I try to make that last landing when I'm doing my night currency stuff to be a power off 180. And it's hard because it's dark. You don't have as much visual reference. And so if you make that one, you're probably in pretty good shape. So try and incorporate some of those things to keep your proficiency up, whether they're required for the minimums or not. And then if you're not, ask a CFI to ride with you. Don't go out and try anything that you're not comfortable doing unless you got some help with you and somebody that's really going to be able to protect you and help keep you safe. So Devin, as we wrap, I'll ask you, how do you want people to find you online? How do you want people to see Family Pilot stuff, if you can direct them in any of that stuff? And then any closing remarks from you?
No, I appreciate the invitation. I love what you guys are doing. I have a passion for growing an awareness of general aviation and a passion for general aviation pilots staying proficient for us folks that are not flying every day or looking at an airline schedule. So thank you for letting me bring my topic up. I hope that people don't write down all of what we said and make that how they're going to do it, but I hope that it makes them ask themselves, well, how do I stay proficient, and should I jump in the plane on Thanksgiving Day if I haven't flown in 6 months and go off and do something? So keep the discussion alive, and general aviation is truly amazing, and we're very fortunate living where we live here in the U.S. to have so many general aviation airports. Don't take that for granted. There's a lot of other countries, including where I'm from, where the GA scene is just not that. So we are fortunate for it. You might gripe when you get a ramp fee at a small little airport, but just know that might be helping that airport stay there for you. For Family Pilot, we're having a great time. We started doing some pilot and pause flights and some compassion flights, and it's a great way to stay proficient. It's flying for a cause. It's absolutely rewarding. But you can check out Family Pilot on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. YouTube's probably the more popular one, and we'll put videos on there. But reach out, let us know what trips you want to see or what we can do better. If you have any questions, we're always happy to have a discussion.
Thanks. Wally, anything to wrap?
No, sounds good.
All right. Thanks for listening. As always, stay behind the prop and be proficient. Till next week. Thanks.
Bravo Tango Papa, we are clear of the active runway and would like the taxi to park.
Bravo Tango Papa, taxi to park. Great show. Have a nice day.
Taxi to park, thanks. You too, Bravo Tango Papa.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Prop. Please follow us on social media at Behind the Prop or visit our website, www.behindtheprop.com. Until next week, fly safe, everyone.